And welcome back. He's the only soldier in the world to lose an arm in combat and return to the battlefield. In his new book, Disarmed, Unconventional Lessons from the World's Only One-Armed Special Forces Sharpshooter, Izzy Ezekwai shares his incredible story, and it's inspiring people in Israel and around the world. Take a look.
I wasn't born into like an Orthodox family, an Orthodox Jewish family. That happened when I was about 8 years old. My parents sat me down and they're like, "Hey buddy, this is happening now." And I was switched to a religious school, and that was really the first time that we started to learn the Bible, the Torah. And I discovered the Israelites and how they suffered in Egypt, what they went through as a people, and it bothered me. And the main catalyst was my father decided to take my family to Israel for my bar mitzvah. And we spent 3 weeks traveling the country. It really was an amazing trip. But on one of the very last days, we decided to drop off our laundry at a laundromat that's on a very busy intersection. 30 or 40 minutes after we left that intersection, a terrorist walked into a Sbarro's pizzeria that's on the same corner that we had just passed. And he had a guitar case that was loaded with explosives. And when he set it off, about 130 people were injured, 15 were killed, among them 7 women and children and a newborn child. And watching footage of this loop on the news was the first time that it dawned on me that all of these things that I had told myself when I was younger, that my people are okay, that it's ancient history, I had been lying to myself, I'd been wrong. Then I turned 18 and I became eligible for Birthright, which is a free 10-day trip for young Jews around the world. And I signed up just assuming that I'd have a good time, meet some girls, free hotel rooms and food and the bus and the flight, so it was gonna be a great time. And what ended up happening is I fell in love with the soldiers. I just had the urge after a couple minutes to pull out my phone, and I dialed my father back in the US, and I told him I'm joining the IDF. I had tears, rolling freely down my cheeks, and I didn't realize until years later when I was piecing my own story together that when I made that phone call, I had just crossed the intersection of King George and Yaffo, where the attack had happened 5 years earlier. So that's really what pushed me to serve. By the time the 9.5 months of training had ended, I felt ready for whatever would come my way. I got a phone call from my commander, and even before I picked up, I knew that something had to be wrong because I saw on the caller ID that it was him and it was the Sabbath. He wouldn't be calling if something hadn't happened. And when I answered, he told me that war had broken out on the Gaza border. This was Operation Cast Lead at the end of the year 2008. And he was calling to let me know that our unit was being sent right to the border. The unit spent about 2.5 weeks patrolling that border before we got our first piece of bad news. A captain from our brigade had been hit by a few RPGs, and he lost his life, unfortunately. We got back to base early that morning to find out what had happened. We were told that we were going in for the first time so that we could replace his position, that we could retrieve his body, reinforce his unit. And it was while we were preparing on base that a mortar landed about 1/2 foot away from me. A mortar is a very large military-grade munition. It has a very large blast radius, so if it landed, unfortunately, in the center of a room like this, the entire room would be destroyed. And it landed about 1/2 foot away from me. So having lost my left arm was a breeze, I guess I can say, compared to what could have been. The decision to go back was not a long evolution. It's something that happened right away. I woke up knowing that I wanted to go back. There were a lot of trials along the way. I had to overcome the medication, which was very hard to stop taking because of the severe phantom pain that I still feel currently. I still feel it now. And the doctors were begging me to take it, were telling me that I was crazy to stop. But I understood that a combat soldier is allowed to suffer through pain. Every combat soldier suffers. I still serve. I'm in the Special Forces. I promise you I suffer every year. We all do. But he can't be dependent on medication. So the only way I was going to go back is to stop taking it and to suffer. Now I knew that it wasn't only about me anymore, that if I succeeded, that it would inspire the soldiers around me, that they would see how much it mattered to not only to someone who was wounded, but to somebody who wasn't born there, who didn't have that official obligation. I think it's an obligation regardless. I was very excited at the opportunity to speak for CUFI on campus. CUFI in general, but campus specifically. When students from CUFI stand up for Israel on their campus, they see these students again and again. They have to pass them in the halls, they see them in classrooms. The fight continues for them. And the fact that they choose, out of their own volition, to do this, to me, is inspiring.
What an amazing story. Folks, be sure to pick up Izzy's great new book, Disarmed, Unconventional Lessons from the World's Only One-Armed Special Forces Sharpshooter. It will inspire you. Well, up next, my final thoughts on Israel turning 70 and the heroes that helped make it happen. It's The Watchmen, it's CUFI, only right here on TBN.